Today in the morning, the country has been hit by a very shocking and sad news of the sudden demise of Bob Collymore, who was the CEO of Safaricom PLC. So many questions have been raised left, right and center, and one of the key questions is what is next for Safaricom? Joining me to have this conversation is Mbitha Mwema, who is the host of Markets Today and also a financial analyst. Thank you very much, Mbitha, for making time. This is a very shocking state, not just for Kenyans, but for Safaricom. But before we discuss what is need for Safaricom, let's just begin by contextualizing where is Safaricom currently at in terms of how they're performing in the market.
So where it's at today, it's trading slightly above 28 shillings. In the market today, we actually didn't see much activity happening. It still remains the top traded stock. When we speak to the traders and trying to get a sense of what our investors talking about on the market, we're not hearing jitters or anything, largely because he was unwell. He had been unwell. This was an unfortunate occurrence with him passing away the way he did. But then I don't think the market is saying now that the leader of Safaricom, the largest traded stock on the market, the highest market capitalization, has passed away, let's get out of the stock. That's not what we are hearing.
What direction is Safaricom likely to take in terms of leadership?
You have to always remember that the CEO, he bears the vision. His responsibility is to deliver the vision of the board. So the board says is what we want to do. His work is to implement that vision and to ensure that that vision is scaled out and communicated to the different people. So when we begin to look at the people underneath Mr. Collymore, so Satish, Joseph and Sylvia, and I'm sure there are many others, when you begin to look at them and what they have been doing, then in a way you're saying that there was the CEO role, but now that the CEO has left, it doesn't mean that work doesn't continue. So there's the emotional element that we have lost somebody who was dear to us. We've lost him to a disease, and it could have happened to anyone. But then there's always the element which is a very cold and brutal truth that a company is a going concern. It always lives beyond you. So you could be seated in this chair tomorrow. Somebody else could potentially come and ask me the same questions, and vice versa. This could be somebody else seated here. So the element of corporate law, as long as it's a going concern, it keeps going. And it just has to find a way to reassign resources, whether it's capital, whether it's labor, whatever resource it is, to be able to enhance and deliver on the vision.
What would you say will be the upfront task of the new CEO that will take over?
I think the key thing would be regulation really, because when you look at the last statement when the board extended Mr. Bob Collymore's term, two things: regulation, operating environment. Operating environment, I look at it in terms of the tough economic cycle that we're going through. There's a slowdown in businesses, increased redundancies, liquidity and consumption is not as rife as it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. When you look at it in that way, then it's the challenge is for Safaricom to create new products and to enhance the touch points with its consumers so that it ensures that it's still growing in terms of its top line and its bottom line. So they have more control because it's just rejigging or finding out how do we sell products and services to our customers. I think the greater risk is more on the regulatory element. How do we ensure that a law is not passed and we are not ready for it? Today there's a bill in Parliament, the Kenya Telecommunications Bill. It's saying we need to split Safaricom from M-Pesa, separate the two, and do the same for Airtel. Separate Airtel money from Airtel the telco. If that thing happens today, then quickly, how do you replace 30% of your revenue? So if you ask me, the person that we would want to see there, or I think would add slightly more value, is somebody who's able to, or rather understands the nuances when it comes to political clout and who holds the regulation, how to manage that. There's that is so important, because you could have buy-in from Treasury, then you don't have buy-in from Parliament. You could have buy-in from the Ministry of ICT, then you don't have buy-in from some parliamentarians. So it really just scuttles you. That's a very important thing. And maybe also another element that we need to capture and we cannot ignore is the ownership structure. So 40% is owned by Vodacom, UK, 35% is owned by the government of Kenya. And there have been conversations, and I suspect I'm preempting a question here. There have been conversations from the Kenyan side. Why can't we have a Kenyan CEO?
Exactly, because that's also something I wanted us to touch on. As you can see, maybe Joe and Sylvia, Kenyan. So there have been those speculations in the market that Previously, it was Michael Joseph, and then we had Bob Collymore. If this company is 35% owned by the government and M-Pesa is a Kenyan invention, then why can't we have a Kenyan CEO?
Exactly. So I think maybe that could also be a way of pushing that agenda, and rightfully so. But I think whoever they decide, whoever makes the final decision on this, I suspect that it will be somebody who has slightly more political clout as opposed to driving the sales, because Safaricom it's nearing its maturity, at least on its current products. So they already know the market, they know what they need to do. But then the person who's going to be at the helm, I feel, would potentially be, whether it's somebody who comes from the market or internally or from wherever they come from, somebody who understands the political nuances of the political elite in Kenya. Because if you don't understand that, you could be sipping coffee and the MPs sign off and say split Safaricom. Then what do you do?
30% revenue loss. Finally, as we come to a close of this conversation, Bob Collymore has been eulogized by many as a great leader. But from where you sit, what is the greatest legacy that Safaricom will remember Bob Collymore for?
So in terms of legacy, what I'm taking out from this person, somebody who's extremely optimistic, very optimistic, somebody whose endurance and resilience are above par. You know, somebody who was able to change his challenging situation, get over it, put it aside, and move on. And I think that's the element of and value of leadership. I think leadership transcends your technical capabilities. It has to touch on who your value proposition as a person, but your own innate values. Because whatever you're able to succumb internally, you can be able to overcome externally, and then people are able to learn and find encouragement and direction from following you as a leader in that regard.
Well, thank you very much, Mbede. Thank you for making time.
Thank you.
That's why we leave it, ladies and gentlemen.